You stand alone in your bedroom. The lights are dim. The mirror catches your eye. You step closer. Love yourself. The world has told you. So you look at yourself hard. You squint, flex, smile, pout, whisper affirmations under your breath. You've followed the guides. You've read the posts. You've liked the quotes. You've lit the candles. You've said it enough times that you almost believe it. And yet, when the noise dies down and you are left with nothing but your reflection, why does the silence still gnaw? Why does your chest still feel hollow, your smile feel counterfeit? Why does that dark voice inside you, the one no one is supposed to admit exists, still say, "You're not enough"? The modern self-love movement has wrapped itself in pastels and mantras, promising salvation through skincare routines and Instagram captions. Promises that healing comes from treating yourself gently, from repeating affirmations like spells, from believing in your intrinsic worth just as you are. But what if this promise is a lie? Not entirely a malicious lie, but a sedative. A beautiful half-truth designed to numb rather than awaken. A spoonful of sugar offered to a society addicted to distraction. In an age obsessed with self-esteem, what we rarely discuss is this. There is a difference between loving yourself and indulging yourself, between healing and hiding. We are told to look inward, but what do we find when we get there? Do we uncover some glittering, flawless self, just waiting to be affirmed? Or do we find layers of contradiction, shame, guilt, and buried aggression we'd rather not face? Carl Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Yet the self-love rhetoric today skips this darkness entirely. It offers no tools to confront it, only the suggestion that you are already whole, already perfect, already lovable just because. But if you were truly whole, would your loneliness still ache? If you were already healed, why would so much of your self-worth collapse with one ignored text, one rejection, one night alone? This movement, ironically, may have set us further from genuine love, because real love, for self or others, is not blind. It is not rooted in illusion. It does not grow in the greenhouse of ego where no discomfort is allowed. Love, if it is to be deep and transformative, must pass through the crucible of truth, even painful truth. Imagine someone who has never lifted a weight being told, "You are already strong enough. Just believe it." No training, no resistance, no struggle, just belief. That's what self-love has become. Motivational noise disconnected from self-awareness. We've begun to mistake comfort for care, validation for growth. And in that substitution, we have betrayed ourselves. But how did we get here? Why did this movement rise with such force? What cultural wounds did it claim to heal? And more disturbingly, what parts of ourselves has it asked us to abandon in the process? Before we can untangle the web, we must understand what we were trying to escape. And to do that, we must go backward into the very soil from which this movement grew. Because only when we see the origins can we begin to recognize its illusions. Only then can we ask the real question: if the mirror lies, what exactly are we trying to see? To understand why the self-love movement spread like wildfire, we must return to the wound that sparked it. Picture a world saturated with judgment. A world that teaches you, from infancy, that your worth is transactional. That love must be earned through obedience, beauty, productivity, perfection. A world of conditional affection, where to be accepted means to perform. This isn't fiction. This was, and for many still is, reality. Underneath the glossy advertisements for self-care, there is a cultural exhaustion, a fatigue from chasing approval that never quite arrives. Generations raised by emotionally distant parents or burdened by toxic productivity have learned, painfully, that love from others is conditional, and often so is love for self. The self-love movement was born not from arrogance, but desperation. It emerged in response to decades, perhaps centuries, of systemic self-rejection. It rose to counteract a capitalist machine that profits from your insecurity. It dared to whisper, "You are worthy, even if no one told you." And this was beautiful, necessary, radical even, but like all revolutions, it went too far. In its urgency to fix what was broken, the movement became reactive. What began as a bomb turned into a shield. Instead of creating tools for depth, it forged slogans. Instead of inviting us into the darkness with courage, it fled to the light and camped there. We were told, "You don't need to change," as a defiant cry against those who said we were never enough. But slowly, that turned into an unwillingness to grow, to confront, to see. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises." It's a haunting insight. Even in self-loathing, there is a twisted form of structure, an acknowledgement of responsibility. But what happens when we erase judgment altogether? When all accountability is pathologized as shaming? When every critique is dismissed as negativity? We breed fragility, not freedom. We begin to avoid the very experiences that could shape us: challenge, rejection, the pain of honest self-confrontation. We turn healing into an aesthetic, not a journey. We practice self-love the way we scroll through curated feeds, choosing only what pleases the eye, blocking anything that feels hard. And yet the paradox remains. We keep repeating affirmations, but our inner world stays fractured. We surround ourselves with messages of empowerment, but we still feel powerless. We drink the water, but we remain thirsty. Why? Because the wound is still there, and no amount of external validation can replace the sacred, brutal work of facing it. The self-love movement tried to fill a void, but instead of depth, it offered decoration. Instead of self-knowledge, it offered self-soothing. And in doing so, it diverted us from the path that might have led to real healing. The wound that birthed this movement was real, deep, deserving of compassion. But no wound heals just because we stop looking at it. In the next section, we'll descend further into the self, into the murky territory the self-love movement avoids at all costs, because that's where transformation begins. We'll explore the shadow, the parts of you you've been taught to hide, to repress, to disown. The parts that don't fit in mantras or look good in the mirror. The parts that may hold the key to becoming whole. You've been told to love yourself. But which self, exactly? The one that is kind, generous, glowing after yoga? The one who forgives and meditates and posts inspirational quotes? The curated self, the edited self, the one that fits within the golden frame of what worthy is supposed to look like? Or do you mean the self that gets jealous of a friend's success? The self that fantasizes about revenge? The one that manipulates, lies, procrastinates, obsesses? The parts that you hide even from yourself? We speak of self-love as though the self is a monolith. But in truth, the self is a fractured cathedral. Catacombs and corridors, saints and serpents, all tangled together. And most of us love only the parts that shine. What we ignore, what we exile, is what Carl Jung called the shadow. The unconscious parts of ourselves we disown because they are inconvenient, threatening, shameful. But Jung also warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The modern self-love movement is terrified of the shadow. It clings to positivity like a lifeboat, afraid that if it admits to anything darker than self-acceptance, it will drown in guilt or shame. But what it fails to understand is this: real self-love does not deny the shadow, it includes it. Let's be honest. Loving your light is easy. It's self-congratulatory. But loving your hunger for control, your hidden cruelty, your capacity for rage, that is the love that breaks you open. That is the love that humbles, and therefore transforms. Because you cannot be whole if you are fragmented. You cannot be free if you are only half alive. And any version of self-love that requires disowning the ugliness within you is not love. It is spiritual bypassing. We've turned self-love into a sanitized performance. And in doing so, we have become estranged from ourselves. We curate, we crop, we filter not just our photos but our psyches. We imagine our shadow as an intruder when, in truth, it is the rejected child within us, begging to be acknowledged. Consider the common advice. Let go of what no longer serves you. What if what no longer serves you is the very narrative that you're already healed? What if the toxic thoughts are not poisons to purge, but signals to heed? When you feel envy, it's not a moral failure. It's an arrow pointing toward your unmet desires. When you feel rage, it's not a character flaw. It may be the voice of your boundaries, screaming from decades of suppression. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "A man can do what he wants, but not want what he wants." This captures the terrifying truth. We are not sovereign over our own impulses. We are layered beings, filled with contradictions. And real love, mature love, does not demand purity. It demands presence. So what happens when we bring the shadow into the light? Not to shame it, not to fix it, but to sit with it. Listen, let it speak. You might find that the parts of you you've tried hardest to suppress are the very parts carrying your deepest intelligence. Your authenticity, your emotional honesty, the raw, undigested parts of your humanity that no one ever taught you how to hold. The shadow is not your enemy. The refusal to face it is. And so, while the self-love movement chants, "You are enough," it often forgets to say, even when you are ugly, even when you are wrong, even when you are selfish, broken, bitter, unlikable, especially then, because love that is afraid of darkness is not love at all. It is performance. In the next section, we will examine how the self-love movement became commodified, how capitalism took this sacred inner work and turned it into product, profit, and performance, how your deepest emotional needs were turned into a market niche, and why buying another crystal, journal, or affirmation deck won't save you from yourself. You walk into a boutique. The scent of sandalwood is thick in the air. Shelves gleam with rose quartz, handmade journals, bath oils, and pastel-colored books promising inner peace. In bold letters, one cover whispers, "You are enough." Something in you aches for it. You reach for the book, or the candle, or the velvet-wrapped affirmation deck. Maybe this next ritual will soothe the gnawing inside you. But what if the very system selling you healing is invested in keeping you wounded? The moment self-love became aesthetic, it stopped being revolutionary. Once, the cry for self-acceptance rose from the margins. It was a protest, a defiance against a world that profited off your self-loathing. But now, that same cry is printed on coffee mugs and sponsored posts. It's a brand, a look, a curated vibe, and what was once sacred has become spectacle. Capitalism doesn't care about your wholeness. It cares about your hunger. It needs your dissatisfaction to survive. And it is remarkably skilled at cloaking itself in the very language meant to liberate you. Self-love, once a rebellion, has been absorbed by the very machinery it sought to challenge. Now, your pain is a demographic. Your healing is a sales funnel. Want to love yourself? There's a serum for that. A sweatshirt. A retreat package starting at $2,499. But where is the mess? The rawness? The trembling, naked truth of your becoming? You won't find it here. It doesn't photograph well. This is not an anti-capitalist rant. It's a psychological reckoning. Because something changes in the psyche when healing becomes consumable. It seduces you into believing that you can buy your way into worthiness. That self-actualization is just one more product away. But real inner work isn't branded. It's not sexy. It doesn't glow in lavender lighting. It looks like this: nights alone, grieving the versions of yourself that no longer fit. Mornings where you sit with your shame without running. Hours spent confronting truths that won't fit in a caption. And none of it comes with a discount code. Aldous Huxley warned us of this in Brave New World. You can't consume much if you sit still and read books. But now, even books tell you what you want to hear. Even stillness has a market. So ask yourself, if your self-love is dependent on purchases, platforms, and aesthetics, what happens when all of that is stripped away? Who are you without the rituals, the hashtags, the glowing routines? Can you sit in a silent room with your pain and not need to treat it? Can you face yourself? Not the version you show the world, but the one you wake up as, aching and unfiltered? Or have you outsourced your healing to a machine that can only sell you more of what you don't need? Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "If you're lonely when you're alone, you're in bad company." Brutal, but maybe necessary. Because if your self-love cannot survive solitude, it was never self-love, it was dependency in disguise. Capitalism thrives on illusion, and the most profitable illusion of all is that you are not enough unless you keep buying, keep consuming, keep improving. The lie isn't just that self-love will save you. The deeper lie is that self-love can be packaged at all. In the next section, we'll confront the spiritual confusion caused by this commodified culture of affirmation. We'll explore why, in trying to bypass suffering, we've lost our ability to feel, and why true meaning is found not in escape, but in engagement with suffering itself. What happens when you try to heal without pain? When you speak of growth but avoid grief? When you whisper mantras over wounds you've never dared to name? You become spiritually anemic, glowing on the surface, hollow beneath. This is the silent epidemic at the heart of the self-love movement. Not just commodification, but emptiness. A slow, aching erosion of meaning beneath all the glitter and glow. In our quest to feel good, we have lost the ability to feel deeply. Because if you're always chasing positivity, where does your sorrow go? Where does your anger live? Your existential dread? Your unanswered questions? They don't vanish. They don't dissolve. They bury themselves in the body. They morph into restlessness, anxiety, compulsions, numbness. And then we wonder why, in a world overflowing with wellness tools, people still feel so utterly alone. The truth is, we've mistaken comfort for healing. We've mistaken affirmation for transcendence. But there is no awakening without suffering. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. This is precisely what our culture has done. Distracted itself endlessly from the death of God, from the decay of tradition, from the unbearable silence of our own mortality." And so the self-love movement became a kind of spiritual fast food. Quick, tasty, sedating, but devoid of nutrition. We turned away from the hard path, the sacred path, the meaningful path, the one that requires loss, confusion, humility, the one that teaches you not just how to soothe yourself, but how to rebuild yourself. Not how to avoid suffering, but how to suffer well. Because suffering, when faced directly, carves out space in the soul. It deepens you. It slows you down. It forces reflection. It demands that you ask the questions no affirmation will ever answer. Why am I here? What am I called to become? What must I sacrifice to be whole? But those questions hurt. And so we look away. We wrap ourselves in spiritual platitudes like, everything happens for a reason, and you're already complete. Never noticing how those phrases become armor against the rawness of life. We've become a culture allergic to depth. We want enlightenment without ego death, empowerment without accountability, wholeness without breakdown. But life does not work that way. There is no rebirth without dissent, no peace without confrontation, no meaning without suffering. And meaning is what your soul is truly starving for. Not more confidence, not more likes, not more daily reminders that you're doing your best. What you crave is a sense that your pain matters, that your scars mean something, that the chaos of your inner world is not a defect, but a passage, that your struggles are not signs of failure, but initiations into a deeper way of being. But meaning is earned, not given, not bought. It is forged in the fires of uncertainty, despair, and radical honesty. And that kind of love, the love that births meaning, is not always gentle. It doesn't always say, "You're perfect as you are." Sometimes it says, "You're capable of more." Sometimes it says, "Break open, burn down, begin again." Because there is no path to your true self that doesn't pass through the valley of unknowing. In the final section, we will walk that valley. We will look at what lies beyond the glittering illusions, toward a form of self-love that is neither convenient nor cute, but fierce, grounded, and transcendent. We will speak of wholeness not as something you affirm, but something you become. There comes a moment, quiet, often terrifying, when the glitter peels away. The mantras no longer soothe. The rituals begin to feel like theater. You wake up one morning and feel nothing. The mirror offers no magic. The voice inside whispers not hate, but something far more dangerous: indifference. And that's when it happens. The rupture. The realization that self-love, as you've known it, was a mask. Not because it was false, but because it was incomplete. It tried to comfort you without confronting you. It tried to protect you from pain, not walk you through it. It told you to stay where you are, instead of daring you to become who you could be. But wholeness isn't comfort, it's confrontation. It is the sacred act of gathering all the lost and hated pieces of yourself and calling them home. It is holding your contradictions in both hands and refusing to flinch. It is sitting in the ashes of who you used to be and having the courage not to rebuild too quickly. Because real self-love doesn't say, "You are enough." It says, "You are not yet all you could be, and I will walk with you through that fire." That kind of love breaks you. It burns away your ego, your projections, your attachments to who you think you are. It forces you to see not just your pain, but how you've used it. As armor, as excuse, as identity. And then it asks you to rise. Not as a perfected version, but as a person in motion. A person willing to confront their smallness without collapsing into it. A person who understands that worth is not a declaration. It's a devotion, practice, something lived into, breath by breath, choice by choice. This is not the language of the market. It won't fit on a t-shirt. It won't trend. But it is the only self-love that can save you. Wholeness means reclaiming what you've buried. Your rage, your longing, your grief. It means naming your fears instead of bypassing them. It means breaking patterns that feel like home and stepping into unknown landscapes without a map. And it means love not as indulgence but as discipline. Love that wakes you up at 4 a.m. to face what you've avoided. Love that challenges your lies with truth. Love that does not flatter but sharpens. That does not coddle but compels. Nietzsche once said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." That chaos, the tension, the tearing, the tremble of becoming, is sacred. And the self-love that leads to wholeness honors that chaos. It does not mute it. So ask yourself, do you want to feel better, or do you want to become? Because one is a temporary fix. The other is a lifelong becoming. The lie behind the self-love movement isn't that loving yourself is wrong. It's that loving yourself should always feel good. It shouldn't. Not if it's real. Not if it reaches the bone. Real self-love is a descent and a resurrection. It's facing your shadow and standing anyway. It's becoming the kind of person your wounded self never thought was possible. Not perfect, but present. Not polished, but alive. So burn the scripts, break the mirrors, sit in the silence, and then, from that stillness, begin the sacred work. Not of affirming what you are, but of becoming all that you were afraid to be. That is the love worth seeking. That is the love that heals. That is the love that frees.